how do you think it's going? I've heard the word, James just said skeptical. I've also heard the arguments are quirky. Is this a case that the administration, you think, is arguing the right way? And is it winnable, Professor Dershowitz?
I think it's winnable. I think they're leaving out one very important argument, which the justices are leaving out too. They're leaving out Article 5 of the 14th Amendment, which says the following: the Congress shall have the power to enforce by appropriate legislation the provisions of this article. It seems to me it's up to Congress to decide who is subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. So the amendment itself says anybody born or naturalized and subject to its jurisdiction thereof. But it's Congress who decides who's subject to the jurisdiction. So Congress could pass a law saying, you know, if a pregnant woman passes through Chicago on the way to China and gets birth pains and suddenly has to be taken off the airplane and gives birth and then goes on to China, and the child never touches the United States again, according to the ACLU, that person is a citizen of the United States. Congress could easily say that person is not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. Now, could it say that about?
Why do you think that?
That's a hard
they
question.
haven't explored that? Why do you think they haven't explored that Article 5 then, that argument?
Because I think neither side wants this to go to Congress. I think the Trump administration wants the Supreme Court to hold that there's an absolute rule that says you can't be a citizen just because you're born in the United States. And the ACLU wants a rule that doesn't allow Congress to in any way interfere with birthright citizenship. So I think neither side wants to see Congress in this act, but it has to be. The amendment itself gives to Congress the right to implement this amendment, and it can do it in a way that makes sense. Look, birthright citizenship makes no sense at all if it's applied to people who have no connection to this country, who happen to have been born here, as many people are. So it makes sense.
Right.
What makes sense is a connection to the country, and then Congress can require that.
Well, Congress is not acting very functional with the partial government shutdown, so maybe they're just a little bit gun-shy there. Professor Dershowitz, I want to ask you about President Trump going in person. This is the first of its kind. Do you think that was a good move, no move? Do you think that they would put any pressure on them? Do you think it impacted the justices? I mean, obviously, it's an important thing. He signed this executive order on day one, but does this help, hurt, or sway, in your opinion?
No, it has no impact on the Supreme Court at all. He was sitting there like anybody else. Look, I'm not even sure he's the first president. I have never seen any evidence to suggest, for example, whether Thomas Jefferson may have gone to the Supreme Court to watch his cousin, Chief Justice Marshall. There were many other important cases. So I'm not sure that the media is right when they say no president has ever before sat in.
Got it.
But certainly not in recent memory. But there's nothing wrong with it. The president has the right to show his interest in a case. He's shown various ways by signing executive order and by showing up. When I was a law clerk in the Supreme Court, the brother of the president, Robert Kennedy, who was the attorney general, showed up for an argument. And that had impact. Justices all looked around. I think they even took him to lunch afterward. I'm not sure. But this is the president.
We can confirm that did not happen today, right? Okay, so aside from your point about that it's actually an argument that they're not exploring, you said it's winnable. Look into the crystal ball. Where does this go? When do we get the decision, and which way is it? And is there a way for them to make a decision but have it be sort of split the baby?
There is, but I think the court could say that absent congressional legislation, we have to take the words of the Constitution literally, born or naturalized in the United States, subject to the jurisdiction. But it might say in dictum that Congress has the power to decide who is subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. In that respect, it could split the baby. I don't think we're going to see outright victory for President Trump's point of view on this. It's conceivable we would see a victory for the other side, but it's also very likely that we'll see some intermediate decision. You never can predict how the court's going to come out based on oral argument, but the oral argument is trending away from the president.
Information. Truth is freedom. Is Newsmax. It's real news for real people.